We often think that strength comes from muscles, power comes from size, and victory belongs to those who are the biggest and strongest. But have you ever wondered if that's really true? History has shown us that the greatest victories were not always won by the strongest warriors, but by those who had the courage to believe in themselves when no one else did. This is the story of a young shepherd boy who proved that real power doesn't come from the sword you carry, but from the courage that lives in your heart. Watch till the end, because this ancient tale holds a timeless lesson that could change the way you face your own battles. Once upon a time, in a prosperous and peaceful kingdom, there lived a generous and brave king who was deeply loved by his people. He ruled with wisdom and compassion, always ready to help those in need. He had a beautiful queen and a kind-hearted daughter, a princess whose grace matched her beauty. In a quiet corner of that same kingdom, far from the palace, there lived a young shepherd boy. He was the youngest of 8 sons in his family. Small and often overlooked, he spent his days in the fields watching over his sheep. Every morning, as the sun rose, he would take his flock to graze, protecting them from wolves, hyenas, and sometimes even lions that wandered from the nearby jungle. To defend his sheep, the boy had taught himself to use a slingshot. Day after day, he practiced until his aim became perfect. But the boy had another passion too, music. While his sheep grazed peacefully, he would sing songs, his voice echoing across the hills. As the seasons passed, he became an expert in both the slingshot and singing. The boy had a dream in his heart. He wanted to join the king's army, to serve his kingdom as a soldier. But whenever he spoke of this dream, his family would shake their heads. "You are too young," they would say. "Wait until you are older and stronger." So the boy remained in the fields, but his courage and kindness never dimmed. One day, the king announced a grand celebration to honor the princess's birthday. There would be a great concert in the palace, with a singing competition open to all. When the shepherd boy heard this news, his heart filled with excitement. He decided to attend. On the day of the celebration, the palace was filled with the kingdom's finest musicians and singers. One by one, they performed before the king, the queen, and the princess. When the shepherd boy's turn came, he stepped forward. Though he wore simple clothes and looked small among the grand performers, when he opened his mouth to sing, the entire hall fell silent. His voice was pure and beautiful, touching everyone's hearts. When the competition ended, the judges declared the shepherd boy the winner. The princess herself came forward to place the medal around his neck. As she did, their eyes met, and something remarkable happened. The princess was moved by his talent and humble nature. The boy, in turn, was touched by her kindness and beauty. From that moment, both began to feel a special connection. But that very evening, as the celebration continued, a messenger rushed into the hall. His face was pale with fear. He fell to his knees before the king and said, "Your Majesty, our neighboring kingdom has declared war. They have launched an attack on our borders. They seek to defeat us and take our wealth." The king's expression turned grave. Without hesitation, he said, "I will lead my army and defend our people." The next morning, the king rode out to battle with his bravest soldiers. The fight was fierce and brutal, But this time, the enemy had brought something terrible, a giant demon, a creature of monstrous size and strength. The demon tore through the king's army like a storm through wheat. The king himself fought with great courage, but the demon struck him down. The king was badly wounded, his injuries so deep that he could barely stand. The enemy king, seeing his advantage, called out across the battlefield, "If anyone from your kingdom can defeat this demon, I will accept defeat and withdraw my army. But if no one dares to fight, your kingdom will fall." The king's soldiers looked at the towering demon and felt their courage waver. It was not that they feared death, they were brave men, but the demon seemed invincible. Even the strongest warriors knew it was practically impossible to defeat such a creature. The king, weak and in pain, returned to his palace. He knew his time was short. With a heavy heart, he made an announcement to his kingdom. "Whoever defeats this demon will become the next king and will marry my daughter, the princess." Still, no one came forward. What could any man do against such a monster? When the young shepherd boy heard of the king's terrible injury and the demon's challenge, his heart filled with determination. He went to his family and said, "I will fight the demon." His brothers laughed. His father said, "My son, you are just a boy. You have never been in battle. Even our greatest warriors cannot defeat this creature. You would be walking to your death." The villagers who heard of his plan tried to convince him to stay. "It is an impossible task," they said. "The demon cannot be defeated by any man, especially not by a young shepherd with no war skills." But the boy's mind was made up. He replied, "I may be young and I may be small, but I have faith. Real power does not come from the size of our bodies or the strength of our arms. It comes from the courage to stand up for what is right." He went to the palace and told the king of his decision. The king, though surprised, saw the determination in the boy's eyes. He ordered his servants to bring his finest armor and his sharpest sword. But when they placed the heavy armor on the boy's shoulders, he shook his head. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully, "this armor is too heavy for me. I cannot move freely in it. Please, let me go with what I know best." And so the young shepherd boy walked onto the battlefield carrying only his slingshot and a small pouch of smooth stones he had picked from the river. When the people saw him approaching the demon, they fell silent. Some covered their eyes, unable to watch what they thought would be a terrible tragedy. The enemy soldiers laughed and mocked him. The giant demon looked down at the small boy and roared with laughter. "They send a child to fight me? What foolishness is this?" But the shepherd boy did not waver. He looked up at the demon, took a stone from his pouch, placed it in his slingshot, and said a quiet prayer. Then, with steady hands and perfect aim, the same aim he had practiced for years while protecting his sheep, he released the stone. The stone flew through the air like a bolt of lightning. It struck the demon right in the center of his forehead. The giant creature's eyes went wide with shock. For a moment, he stood still. Then, like a great tree falling in the forest, the demon crashed to the ground, defeated. A stunned silence fell over the battlefield. Then the king's soldiers erupted in cheers. The enemy army, seeing their demon champion fallen, turned and fled in panic. The battle was won. The young shepherd had saved his kingdom with a single stone and an unshakable belief in goodness. News of his bravery spread throughout the land. Songs were written about the shepherd boy who had defeated the demon. The king, now on his deathbed, called the boy to his side. With his last breath, he declared, "This brave young man shall be our next king." The people who had witnessed the boy's courage and pure heart welcomed this decision with joy. The shepherd boy married the princess, and together they ruled the kingdom with justice, compassion, and wisdom. Under their reign, the land knew a time of great peace and prosperity. In our own lives, we face demons too. Maybe not literal giants, but challenges that seem impossible to overcome. It could be a difficult exam, a career goal, or standing up for your beliefs. In those moments, we often make the same mistake the trained warriors made. We look at the size of the problem instead of the strength of our conviction. We often forget that the real power lies not in physical might, but in the courage to stand up for what is right. The shepherd boy wasn't the strongest, the tallest, or the most experienced warrior. He didn't have great weapons or heavy armors, but he had something far more valuable: unshakable courage and deep faith in doing what was right. You might think that how should I develop such a courage? If you got this question, then you didn't understand the story well. Didn't you notice that the boy practiced with his slingshot for years while tending his sheep? He didn't wait for a crisis to develop his skills. He prepared himself daily with what he had where he was. He becomes expert as time passed. This helped him developing confidence. This confidence awakened courage in his heart. In the same way, you could also develop confidence with regular practice and eventually the courage in your heart. Start develop your own skills right now, like the boy practiced slingshot every day. Believe in yourself, just like the boy who believed his inner strength and choose to fight the demon when the whole world believed it's a foolish decision. And have the courage to step forward when the moment calls for it. The world doesn't need people who trying to wear armor that doesn't fit them, but it needs people brave enough to face their giants with whatever tools they have. Remember this: every person who changed the world was once too young, too small, too inexperienced, or too different, but they chose courage over comfort, faith over fear, and action over approval. They believed in their inner strength. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not enough. Don't wait for permission to chase your dreams. Stand up for what you believe is right, even when you're standing alone. That is where true power lives, not in your muscles, but in your spirit. Now I want you to think, what battle in your life are you ready to face? What dream have you been putting off because you thought you weren't ready? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who's struggling. If this story touched your heart and you believe it can help someone facing their own giant, please like this video and share it with them. Subscribe to our channel to hear more inspiring stories that remind us of our inner strength. Remember, you don't need to be the strongest to win. You just need to be brave enough to try. Keep believing, keep fighting, and never underestimate the power that lives within you. Because size doesn't matter, but the courage does. Until next time, stay courageous and keep moving forward in life.